And the whole idea behind this presentation was the realization for myself in my own processes that stress management doesn't work. It just, no matter what programs, what ways I was always trying to manage stress, I always found out that if I got any kind of solutions that were very short term, and ultimately for me, stress management was just not working. And so I used to think there has got to be another way, or maybe I'm not approaching it from the appropriate direction. This wasn't such a linear process. I'm just trying to put it into some kind of a story. But over time, I also have been a student all my life of the unseen forces of life, and maybe how do they guide us, how they interact with us, and maybe how they even get in our way. And so that's when I started to look at energy management. And as I started to get familiar with the principles of energy, I started to realize that, yes, I had actually been approaching the concept of stress from the wrong direction. And therefore, despite good attempts to try to manage stress, I was having a very difficult time. If you were to think of typical stresses, like look at all of humanity as a whole, and you think of the areas in our lives which represent stress, what would they be?
Money.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Anything to do with money, finance, that's usually a typical stress. What would another one be? How about health? Okay. I think there isn't a human being on the planet that doesn't have some issues over time with health. Okay. What's another area? Yeah. Relationships, right? So all our relations, whether they're the ones with our family of origin, whether they're with our friends, whether they're with our new partners, our businesses, we typically have issues in this area. What's another? Work? Yeah. So career, work. Yeah. We can go on and break all of these out. Now, you'll notice something about these issues in life that most of us deal with. When you take the stress management approach, according to the way I see this model, imagine that these are satellites. And when a satellite pops up in your life, you try to deal with it the best you can. And let's say you're able to, for right now, deal with this money thing, this stress that has to do with money. And let's say you're doing all right with it. And while you're doing that and you think you've got things covered, this thing pops up. And now you have to deal with relationship, some issue that has come up, whether it's work, at home, from the past and the present. And let's say you're really good and you manage to kind of start to handle that too, and you're doing all right. And maybe you even start to get that under wraps and you think, oh gosh, I've got that dealt with, now I'm going to be stress-free, right? Wrong. Because then typically something like this pops up in the career area. Okay? And what I had found was typically I was constantly doing the balancing act. And the minute I thought I was home free and I was handled my stresses and now I could be the stress guru, right? Oh, the stress guru, right? There was always something that the higher power of the universe, call it whoever you want, whoever's having fun with us was saying, oh, well, by the way, catch this one. And I felt like this juggler that was always constantly just trying to keep things afloat and connected and keep from dropping the ball, okay? And one thing I recognized was that I wasn't being very successful at stress management. So I also recognized one thing, that all of these things, if they were satellites, they were revolving around the one common denominator right here, which is, yeah, it's me. So I thought, how curious. One way to resolve this issue would be to say, well, if not for me, none of this would exist, right? We have planets. And then around let's say we have the planet Earth, and around that we have satellites. The satellite's function is to somehow, the satellite can only be there because the Earth is. Make sense? So likewise, if it wasn't for me, then there wouldn't be any stresses. So now I'm not saying we're going to go to the back of the ship and jump off and that's it, our stresses are done, although that would be effective. Right? We will have managed the stress. A little extreme, but, you know. Okay? But I thought this was really interesting. And all this time, I had been going out here trying to deal with this, trying to keep things afloat, trying to do the juggling act and all constantly. And it caused me a lot of stress just trying to manage my stress. But when I realized that at the same time, all of this pointed back to the center of the diagram here, and that it was more about me, that's when I started to look at energy management, because energy management says, you know what? Stop trying to control the stressors outside yourself. Instead, change how you relate to them. In other words, if you're not having a lot of success changing the world to fit you, which I thought was a good idea, I had no problem with it, only if they would get it, right? Then I found out that maybe I needed to change how I related to it. And so I started exploring what is this energy management. Being fortunate, I grew up in a household where energy and things that were not visible but real were just as normal as the physical was. And so that wasn't a stretch for me. But I needed to understand that how this stress thing worked. And of course I had that realization also that, you know what, these aren't going to go away. Sorry to give you the bad news, but stress is a fact of life. Stress is here to stay. Just like the waves of an ocean, we talked about this the other day. They come, they go, they come and go. Whether you like that or not is immaterial. It's just the way it is. So you're thinking, oh, that's really great. Look at all the impact that stressors can have on me. Look at my performance, my productivity, my attitude, my morale, my personal energy levels, my vitality, my peace of mind. All of that goes out the window as my stress levels go up. And you're telling me, Tarun, that these things are here to stay. Sorry. It's been my experience that they're not going to go away. And so the question always is, whether is there hope? And we discussed this in our other presentation the other day too, that the wise ones had also thought about this topic, not just me, although I'd like to take credit, but there are a few people before me the last few thousand years who looked at life and said, wow, there's all of this drama going on and there's so many challenges to us. Is there any hope? Will I ever be at peace? Okay? They would ask the same questions. But they did recognize my favorite insight, that in life, misery is guaranteed. Oh, I know everybody's so thrilled now, right? Should have stayed at the champagne lunch, guys. Misery is guaranteed. It's not going away. But the second part of that formula was wonderful, that realization was, while misery is guaranteed, suffering is optional. Okay? So misery is guaranteed, stress happens. But once we realize that we're going to take an energy management approach by recognizing that these stresses could not occur if not for me, and that I can change how I relate to these stresses, then suffering becomes optional. Part of understanding this is understanding what is this thing called energy, and how is it that my inside world seems to impact my world around me. Where is the connection here? Because I don't see it. Right? I can't, how do I fathom that stuff outside myself and all that's going on inside my world are actually connected and they impact each other all the time? Okay?